Hi, this is Sean D'Souza, and you're listening to the 3-Month Vacation Podcast. This podcast isn't some magic trick about how to work less. Instead, it's about how to really enjoy the work that you do and to enjoy your vacation time. Hi, it's Sean, and you're listening to the 3-Month Vacation. I remember the time when my wife Renuka quit her job, and this is back in 2001. She was so sick of her boss that one day she simply walked out. For a few months, she wasn't quite sure what she wanted to do. However, while she considered where she would work next, she decided to help me out a little bit. First, she made sure that everything was tidied up in our small home office. And then she went to work using the email software. And we owned this software called MailLoop at the time. I was so nervous. Today's email software is usually hosted. It's something like Aweber or MailChimp, and it doesn't take much time to learn. But back then, the software was the mail server itself. You sent out a whole bunch of newsletters, and that took a couple of hours as they went out one by one, and then the bounce backs would start. All the unsubscribes would come in, and again, you were sitting there for hours. I'd been using this software for quite a while, and I was comfortable with it. But Renuka was new to the whole operation, and me, I was clearly nervous. I'd stand over her shoulder, something she hates me doing, and I'd watch as she sent out our email newsletter. Does this sound like an atom-sized operation to you? It should, because all these years later, we don't exactly have a team. We rely on a few people to help us with particular tasks, but by and large, it's still just the two of us. And if you've been following the story of Psychotactics for a while, you'll know that without any hoopla, we've grown this business to run quite successfully. And by success, we mean success on our own terms, which is exactly the tone and the direction of this new book by Paul Jarvis. It's called Company of One, and it shows you how you can follow the beat of your own drum. Today's podcast isn't strictly a book review. Instead, it's a review of a few concepts. The reason why I chose this book is simply because it's anti-hype. Now, this book is not a prescriptive book in the sense that it doesn't tell you, take this step and do this, and here's a how-to, and here's what you do. It's not like that. Instead, it's conceptual for most of the way. It's conceptual in the genre of Quiet by Susan Cain, which talks about introverts. If you're looking for stage-by-stage how-to advice, well, then this book is not for you. However, if you're looking to get more comfortable in your own skin and you don't want to rule the world, then this might be something that you pick up and read. Oh, and one more thing. Paul is a friend who I've gotten to know over the years, and in his book, he does take up a page or two to talk about psychotactics. He describes it in quite a bit of detail. Now, this description of psychotactics shows up early. I think it's in chapter 2. And while I am flattered, he was able to get most of the information solely through interviews that I had done online. And in particular, one interview. So just so you know, there's full disclosure here. And on that very legal sounding note, let's explore the 3 concepts in this book like we do on every podcast. I'll mix it up with a few of our own experiences so that you know how we've applied the concepts and how we continue to do so. So what are the 3 concepts we're going to cover this week? The first thing is why you need to set upper boundaries for your business. The second is how to cope with envy as your business grows around you. And finally, is leadership a disadvantage in a company of one? Let's start out with the first thing, which is why you need to set boundaries, not just boundaries, but upper boundaries for your business. Until December 2015, I thought that having 30 people at a workshop was a very tiny number. Then, in consecutive workshops, first in Nashville, USA, and then in Amsterdam, Holland, we had 16, actually I think it was 15 participants each. Until that moment, I'd always considered anything under 30 people to be a bit of a problem. And then it happened. We got about half that number. Why was this the case? Was it the venue? Was the topic a bit obscure? Maybe it was because it was a really busy season because the workshops were being held a couple of weeks before Christmas. Whatever the reason, I was quite disappointed at first. Over the years, when we go back to the earliest workshops, and this is going back all the way to 2003, we always filled the room with about 30 people. To suddenly regress to 15, somehow, no matter what reason you have in your head, it doesn't seem to feel like progress. It feels like a regression of sorts. But as we went through those 3 days of workshop, I realized that I got more time to spend with every client, and in turn, they got more time to spend with me. Even clients who had been to previous workshops loved the smaller group. And every client was showing me different drafts of their assignment, and we were able to work through it and fix things. And they went home with this much bigger result that we'd achieved in any other workshop before that. And that's when Renuka and I took this mad decision. We decided that we were never going to have more than 15 people at a workshop. And we changed that slightly because we need to have an even number, 16, just for how the assignments are created. But that's it. We decided that we were not going to have more than 16 people at a workshop. And that was our boundary. At one point, 30 was a boundary, and now it was 15, 16. And for the whole world, this seems very odd. Why have a boundary? Why have that stoppage? Why not grow the business exponentially? Why not have more? Why put a boundary? Why put that barrier, that constriction? And yet, it's precisely what Paul covers in one of his earliest chapters of the book. It's the fact of having boundaries, but not just boundaries, but upper boundaries. We all know what low boundaries happen to be because we've all been at zero. However, the upper boundary, the upper limit, is really the part that tests your mettle. At first, as your business grows, you might have just enough to pay your bills. But if you do a great job with your clients and you consistently market your business well, you'll find that there is seemingly no upper limit. You may choose to increase your prices, and clients will still come through the door. You take more clients, you earn more money, you do more, and even more. And it's not unusual to feel exhilarated and out of control at the same time and in the same moment. And yet, you're not sure where that bubble will burst. Darren Brown is an author, he's a mentalist and illusionist, and he clearly explains how we lose control. In one of his stage productions, he says, any book on happiness is likely to tell you how to set clear goals on what you want to achieve, and then work towards achieving them. The problem is that it doesn't work. The philosopher Alan Watts made the point that when you listen to a piece of music, you don't just skip ahead to the end where it all comes together. In life, however, we are obsessed with endings. And Brown suggests that we live in the now, and he's right too. But when we're uncertain about the future, we're uncertain about how our good fortune will last, we're more than likely to ignore all of that advice, to just keep working. And the author of Company of One, Jarvis, helps us to stay in the now, while putting a lid on the unfolding madness of growth. His definition is start small, define your growth, and then keep learning. All of us don't need to hire more people. We don't need to pile on more infrastructure. We don't need fancy teams, and we don't always need to increase the bottom line. Yet, when you look around you, every message seems to be screaming the same thing, which is growth, growth, growth is good for you. After all, who gets featured in Fortune magazine? Who makes it to Inc. magazine? What does fast company even mean? Most of us start off in business to gain more control over our lives. And that's not how things unfold. A company of one is simply a business that questions growth. A company of one, writes Jarvis, is one that builds a business around your life and not the other way around. It's not necessarily anti-growth, it's not even anti-revenue, and it's not even a one-person business. It's just that you need to question whether just because some crazy marketer is constantly saying you need to hustle, 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 that you should take that advice. You should be like him. That's what it's asking you to question. Company of one is more about questions that you ask yourself about how you can solve business problems without needing to add more. And if all of this sounds very philosophical, there are statistics. Economic statistics to back up why growth is not necessarily the best thing. And there was a study, as they always do, they do studies. So they did this study, there were 3,200 high-tech growth companies, and they were studied by the Genome Startup Project. They found that 74% of them failed. When we look at it, we think, okay, maybe there was competition, maybe they had lousy business plans. When that study looked at the biggest problem, they found that it was about scaling. They all tried to get big much too quickly. But that's only one study. Then the Kaufman Foundation and Inc. magazine, ironically Inc. magazine, they did a follow-up study on the 5,000 fastest growing companies. And the study was done 5 to 8 years after the companies got off the ground, and incredibly, more than 2/3 were out of business. They had massive layoffs, or they sold below their market value. Defining the upper side of what you're willing to manage is crucial. At Psychotactics, we put upper boundaries on almost everything that we do. Every course has its upper boundaries. So a cartooning course will have just 30 clients. An article writing course, because it's more intensive, will have 25 clients. The workshops, as you know, have just 16 participants. The membership site at 5,000 BC, that also has a limit. And it's not just now. That was put in place in 2005. And it said, no matter what, we will never accept more than 1,200 members. And after 15 years, we're about halfway there, and we're in no hurry to increase the numbers quickly. Even our income has an upper limit. In 2007, we realized that we didn't need to keep increasing our revenue, so we hit upon a formula of 3x. That means we earn thrice as much as we spend, and our expenses aren't terribly high for a business. So all our travels, our vacations, our office, home expenses, they're kept at approximately $150K a year. 3 times that amount is about $450K to $500K. And 1/3 of that is paid in income tax, which, by the way, we're very happy to pay. Very happy to pay tax, by the way. 1/3 goes into savings and 1/3 gets spent. And when you look at the numbers above, about $500,000 a year looks like quite considerable, and it is. I'm not saying that it isn't. But you think, wait, if I get to that number, I will be satisfied. I'd be more than happy with that figure, and then I wouldn't go further. But that's not quite human nature. Our nature is to want to go to the next level up. And it's good to go to the next level. But what we've done at Psychotactics is we haven't continued to increase the income. Instead, our next level up is to improve the products, improve the courses, improve it, to make it better, like a software, to make it more elegant. That's our next level up. And the result is that we have this business that's reasonably sane. Sometimes it goes nuts, but it's reasonably sane. And it allows us to take 3 months off every year, to spend lots and lots of time with our nieces, who are delightful, to cook, to paint, and to lead this affluent life. Not over the top, but affluent life. And that's the core of a business. The core of a business is to sustain itself. It's meant for the business owner to have control over their life and their business. And the first step is to put a lid on the upper boundaries. That alone makes a huge difference in how we conduct our business and how we control our expenses. And, at some point in time, at least the people listening to this podcast, would agree with that. We would say, this is how we want to do things. This is why we got into business. And you think, okay, I get it. But there is a second factor that shows up at this point in time. And this factor is very difficult to control. It's not only difficult to control, it's even harder to admit that we have this. And this second factor is called envy. We try to push it away. It doesn't budge. So how do we deal with envy? Is there a way to get it out of our system? Can we do this permanently? Let's find out in this second section. Who is the only 3-time inductee to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? If you answered Eric Clapton, you'd be spot on. According to Wikipedia, Clapton is ranked 2nd in Rolling Stone magazine. And this list consists of the 100 greatest guitarists of all time. And he's also 4th in Gibson's top 50 guitarists of all time. He's won 18 Grammy Awards and sold more than 100 million records. And that makes him one of the best-selling musicians of all time. If you're a musician, you should be feeling at least a touch of envy. Only a bit, of course, because that's how envy works. When we start out, we look up to people. We look up to these people who are so much better than us, and we look at them and we say, that's our hero, that's our heroine. And they're so far above our current standing that we don't tend to feel that deep-seated envy. Instead, we feel this admiration, this great affection for them. Now, if you fail to make that level, that's when jealousy starts knocking on your door. And ironically, the flip side works as well. If you do succeed, then envy also shows up. Suddenly, we don't feel like we're that far behind. We feel like we're on par with that person. Why should their success be so much better than ours, so much greater than ours? Don't we put in the same amount of time? Don't we have the same level of diligence? Why should they get all the glory and all we get are the crumbs? Let's hear what Paul has to say about this.
Social media, we have the ability to look at our tiny pocket computers and see what everybody else has that we don't. And I think that this translates in business as well, where we see people doing well. We can see people's income reports, or we can see their open stats on things like Barometrics, and we can see how much money everybody's making. And I don't think it's bad to have envy, but I don't think envy should be a driver in decisions in life. I think that we can say like, oh, I want something better for myself or my family, or I wish I had what this other person has because it could benefit me in some way. But if that's our sole driver for making decisions, if that's our sole reason for doing the things we do, then envy is just going to lead us to having somebody else. Like if everything goes right in envy, if all of the things line up, if all of the decisions we make are good and bring us to success, the end result of envy is that we're going to end up with somebody else's life.
Somebody else's life, somebody else's business, somebody else's vision, something that they chased. That's pretty much the concept of envy in a nutshell. It's not that weird to want what everybody else has until we go behind the scenes. If we head back to Eric Clapton, for instance, here's what he has to say. What I'm concerned with now is being in my 70s. I'm concerned with not being proficient. I mean, I'm going deaf, and I've got tinnitus, and my hands just about work. I have to get on the bottom of the ladder every time I play the guitar, and this is just to tune it. I've had quite a lot of back pain over the years, he told Classic Rock magazine. It started with lower back pain, and then it turned into what they call peripheral neuropathy, which is where you feel like you have electric shocks going down your leg. Are you still feeling that envy? In an Instagram world, we don't have time to analyze the reality of another person's life. All we see, all we hear is what they choose to tell us. And in business, it's very easy to fall prey to this hype. Marketing can be designed to make you feel like you have a very long way to go. In that world, it seems like everybody's lying on the sand, drinking pina coladas, and sending out one email a week. And yet, there is a flip side to all of that success. For one, as Jarvis says, it's their life, it's their success, and it's their vision. The question is, what is our vision? It took a long time for me to get control over my envy as well. It wasn't like I'd walk around like Godzilla, upset with everyone who was doing better than me. But I had my days. I would read something on Facebook, I would read something in an email newsletter, and this would be someone who started out a lot later than we did and had far more subscribers. They had far more downloads. They seemingly had more of a revenue. Not that we needed it, but it's not logic that enters your mind at that point in time. It's not like you need any of that. Because if you gave me all those things, if you gave us all those things, it's not like our lives would change even an iota. But that doesn't make any sense. Envy just takes over, and then you have to somehow step back or control it. And the problem is that envy is like a glutton. It won't stop with just a tiny morsel. It has to have it all. Within a short time, it's not uncommon to use up all of your energy thinking of something that you can't change and you can't even fix. And as Paul Jarvis says, it's bad for decision making.
Yeah. Yeah, success is so personal that what somebody else's definition of that is, or what somebody else's vision for what they want their life to be isn't necessarily mine. And I know the life that I have is definitely not something that everybody would be envious of if they knew all the like nuts and bolts of it, right? So I think it's just so personal that envy is a bad driver of decision. It's a bad lens to put decisions through. And I think I think a lot of people do. I think I have problems with that sometimes. But I think what it really comes down to is I think envy is an easy default state because it does not require introspection, or it doesn't require taking a step back and considering things. So envy is just easier, as it is an easier decision. Like, oh, I wish I did like 100K last month because you did. So I want to do everything I can to do that. And it doesn't matter if I sacrifice like my life or my family or my time to get that. But if we take a step back and we think like, is this something I really want? Like, is this something I want to do? Am I going to like the way my daily life is going to change if I chase this thing? Then I think we can come to better conclusions. But it requires work.
It requires work, and even if we do stop and think, how do we reduce this envy? In an age-old text from India, there exists a concept, and it's called mudita. Mudita is found in the ancient language of Pali, and it seems to be the opposite of envy, because it means to delight in the good fortunes or the accomplishments of others. And my form of mudita started in 2017, I can't say for sure that envy has been defeated. It's an ongoing experiment, but it no longer has even the slightest foothold that it once occupied. And this is thanks to meditation that I started in 2017. Meditation has allowed me to avoid draining my energy because I consider the whole day to be like an energy capsule. It's like how much energy you're using for all of these tasks. And if you're using even some of that energy towards envy, then that's the drainage. That's going out of your system. That's not what you can put to productive use. And what meditation did for me, and it might not do it for you, but it did for me, is it gave me that ability to focus on what we have and to avoid looking on the Clapton side of the fence. It has brought the wisdom that we all have our issues, and it doesn't matter how rich or famous someone is, they just seem to be better than we are. That we have a great life already. Most of us do. And this brings us to the end of this podcast. Yes, there were supposed to be 3 parts, but we're pretty much at the 25-minute mark here. So let's treat this as a conversation, an ongoing conversation, and continue it in the second part, where we'll explore the concept of leadership. Does leadership act as a detriment to how we're running a business? We'll find out that in the second part. But for now, let's do a summary. What did we learn in this section, this podcast episode? The first thing that we covered was why you need to set upper boundaries for your business. Sounds pretty weird, but we know that there are upper boundaries for everything, including what we eat in a day. We still try to exceed that. We'll push the boundaries. And we know when we've done that. And we know that there is a price to pay. There is a price to pay for all of that excess, that greed that we go through on a single day. And I think business becomes the most insidious of all, because business takes us away from our passions in life. Like maybe you like to paint, or maybe you like to take a walk. Maybe you want to spend time with your family. All of these things that we used to do before we got to work in a job, before we got to business, when we were kind of more free and we could do the things that we really wanted. That's the kind of life that you're trying to always build for yourself. That's the goal. And yet, somehow along the way, the goal becomes, let's double the income, let's double the sales, let's double everything. Yeah, sure. But to what end point? Because at the end of the day, when you think about it, it's just scale. You can just get a bigger house. You can just get a bigger boat. You can barely get a bigger sofa. And the sofa doesn't get any softer. It doesn't get any harder either. So it just becomes this momentum factor. You started to go faster and faster because you wanted to grow your business, and then you don't know how to stop. And putting that boundary, that really helps. What's your boundary? We don't know. But we do know that there needs to be a boundary. The second thing is envy. And this is impossible to manage in a way. The only way I found that I could manage it was with meditation. And meditation is a skill as well. So there you go. You have to learn another skill, which is quite hilarious in its own way. But you start off being pretty hopeless at it, and then you get a little better, and then a little better. It's like how I've been learning Spanish over the years. It's been, 20 years of learning Spanish, maybe more. And I've got pretty good at it. I intend to do like a full Spanish podcast, but that's besides the point. I mean, not the whole podcast, just one episode in Spanish, but that's how good I've got at it. And I think that, if you've tried meditation and you've failed, then remember, it's a skill. And what it does, for me at least, is it creates that energy factor where I look at something and I think, well, good for them. Mudita, good for them. I didn't know this term, mudita, because, of course, it's an ancient Indian thing, but I don't know lots of ancient Indian things. Anyway, it's a good thing to have a term for. So may the mudita be with you. And that brings us to the end of this podcast. What is the one thing you can do? Well, upper boundaries. I don't have to tell you how to do it. You have to set those boundaries yourself. And with that, let's go to what's happening in psychotactics land. Now, it totally depends when you're listening to this podcast, but on the 8th of March, we have the uniqueness course, and that's the home study. And maybe you got to it, or maybe you missed it. But even if you missed it, there are goodies at psychotactics.com/u goodies. And you learn how you get your uniqueness wrong, how to get to your uniqueness, the importance of the mundane and the uninteresting. All of these goodies, you can get them at psychotactics.com/u goodies. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is the article writing course. A lot of people struggle a lot with this. This is what they call the moment of dread. Then becomes the hour of dread, the day of dread, the week of dread. And people talk about this a lot when we're doing the online course. But this is not the online course. This is the home study version. The next online course will be in 2020. So this course will be available on the 5th of April. You have to be on the waiting list to get to this course. And 5,000 BC members get first preference, and then you get second preference if you're on the waiting list, and the rest of the list doesn't hear of it at all. So you have to be on the waiting list. And if you're wondering, well, what's this first preference? It's a digital product. We have limits, remember? So we only sell 25 copies of this article writing course. And yes, it creates scarcity and it creates urgency, but it also creates limits. We decided we don't want to sell 200, 25 is good enough. And it also works very well in terms of marketing. So there you go. But how do you get to that waiting list? You go to psychotactics.com, AW, that stands for article writing, AW goodies. You know what to do next. Fill in the form, you get the goodies, and you also get on the waiting list. So that's psychotactics.com, AW goodies, 5th of April. And of course, join us in 5000 BC. It's where introverts meet and we talk and we have these thoughtful discussions, and there's no grandstanding. And the motto is, be kind, be helpful, or be gone. And now it's time for me to be gone from this podcast. So I'll say bye for now. Bye-bye. Still listening? One of the things that people ask me a lot when I say we have the 3-month vacation podcast, because we take 3 months off, and they say, that's a lot of time. 3 months together, how do you run your business? And then I have to explain that we take 1 month off, and then we work for 12 weeks, and another month off, and work for 12 weeks, and that's how we go about it. And the reason why we had to do that was simply because we tried taking 3 months off. Right back in 2004, we were in the States, and we tried taking 3 months off, and it was a nightmare. It just dragged on and on. People don't realize it, but you're eating 30 meals. That's just breakfast, and then 30 meals for lunch and 30 meals for dinner. So 90 meals or 90 decisions that you have to make, and then where you're going to stay and where you're going to move and what flight you're going to take and all that kind of stuff. And that's 270 decisions to be taken in that span of time. So that was a barrier for us as well. That was that upper limit barrier that we had to put, which is, wait a second, this is how we're going to do it. We're not going to take 3 months off. We're going to take a month off. And then we realized that even a month could be too much. So what we decided was we're going to take about a week to get to the place, as in 2 or 3 days. So we often fly to Singapore. We spend a few days there. Then we get to the other place. And so we take this long journey to get to our vacation spot. And then on the return journey, we'll stop over again. So cumulatively, it's a month. It's about 3 weeks. That is about how much we can take in terms of vacation before getting, oh, this is too much of feta that I've been eating all week, or this is too much of whatever, whichever country we're in. And then we get back home. And it's always great to be back in Auckland. Auckland's just an amazing place. So we'll see you either in Auckland or in 5000 BC. We'll say bye for now. Bye-bye.